So on today's episode, we're thrilled to be joined by our very first guest on Chattercast. We're honoured to have our very good friend, Edward Azher from Sydney, Australia. Edward is a marketing mentor and coach who specialises in creating leading persuaders and influencers. He's also an inspiring and engaging public speaker. We're really excited for Edward to share his experiences and insight into the challenges and successes that life has thrown at him. Welcome to the show, Edward.
Oh, it's an absolute honour to be here. And I just got to say, it's an honour being a guest on your first one. I just want to say all your listeners are very good looking and attractive.
How do you know that?
I just know because, like, you and your dad are really handsome, and therefore handsome people attract good looking people. It's just the way society works.
Oh, I'm blushing on the mic, Edward.
Luckily, there's no video.
Yeah. So, Ed, talk to us about your background, where you were born, where you lived, which city you lived in. Talk about a bit about your family.
Oh, great question. So actually, I'm so proud Australian and actually come from an Iranian background. So my awesome dad came out as a refugee in the 70s to Australia, and like a lot of people in Australia. And yes, come from an Iranian Australian background. Grew up originally in quite a few different places, including the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, which is incredible. And got a great family, in contact with them all the time. Certainly had some ups and downs. Like, as an interesting bit of commentary, I was actually a cancer baby, meaning that my mother actually had very, very dangerous cancer while she was pregnant with me. And basically, my understanding, so basically it was pretty much within 24 hours, the moment I was delivered, in terms of birth, she was straight on the chemo. So it was... So I had an absolutely crazy, bumpy start to life. My mother, just to clarify, my mother...
Were you full term?
I was full term, but I was certainly, even as a baby, I was always hanging on the edge. So it was a very crazy start to my existence.
And in terms of siblings, I mean, how many siblings have you got?
Only child for that exact reason. So my parents originally wanted a few kids, but I became an only child because of my mother's cancer. So only child, and
That's interesting. And I was going to ask you about your last name, Zia, because usually Zia is found in the subcontinent of India and Pakistan, and as a last name, as a surname. So it makes sense that you're sort of Iranian origin. Yeah,
exactly. In fact, for the sake of the interview, do you want to actually hear my full name, which a lot of people don't know? Do you want to hear my full name? My actual full name is Edward Ahmed Ali Muhammad Zia.
Wow, another brother. I did say to my dad off air earlier on, I'm convinced that Edward's, because I was asking where's he from? You know, my dad thought you're from Australia. I said I think he's from Australia, but originally he's definitely somewhere else. And so I think I won that bet.
Well, I think you hit us out of the ballpark with 6.
It's funny you say that. In Australia, that's what I love about Australia. In Australia, everyone's from somewhere. You know, no one. You very rarely meet someone who's Australian. Everyone is like, oh, my parents came from Poland, the Middle East, Pakistan. Everyone's got that kind of story. You very rarely meet, oh yeah, we're like full-on Australians. No, you very rarely hear that. Most people, I meet a first gen like me.
So this is really interesting. So, your education, where were the formative years in terms of your education? Did you flourish?
Long story short, I flourished originally at the start. So, from about 0 to 10 years of age, I absolutely flourished. But what happened was there was a massive family breakdown. My mum got really sick with cancer again, and the family fell apart. And I actually found myself living in different places. So during my formative years, I actually lived in quite a few different environments. And it left me, to be honestly, quite disturbed, actually. I went from being sort of a very happy, somewhat spoilt, actually, 10-year-old to becoming a very disturbed character very quickly. And so I lived in a lot of different places during a very stressful family breakdown. It was very, very hard. Eventually, I got reunited with my family. But what was interesting, though, was 0 to 10 was wonderful. 10 to 19 in my life was very, very difficult. So, a lot of different living environments, a lot of violence. It was very, very difficult conditions from those years of my life.
Edward, you say that you were moved around from place to place. What do you mean by that? Were you put into care? Were you living with one parent or maybe another family member? That's quite a shocking thing to hear, especially in your formative years, where having a solid foundation, having stability, that's really important for a kid growing up. Especially when you hit the teenage years and there's new influences, and essentially boys will be boys. They'll explore and experiment, and it must have been quite a traumatic experience to be having that instability in your home life.
Oh, completely. Everything was totally unstable. So in those years, a family breakdown, parents weren't together, parents weren't talking. I had different people caring for, and I say caring with inverted commas next to it, right? Different people caring for me at the time, including the government. So went to a lot of different schools, went from place to place, and it was even had a few bouts of homelessness in those years, right? A few bouts before that. So it was pretty much, I remember I was probably, I think I did my sort of later years of high school, which I don't know how I got through, but I was quite a disturbed character later on. Eventually got reunited with my family, but by then I was already a very, very disturbed character who had some very strange ideas just from years of violence and instability.
That's a really interesting view, Ed. So how would you describe your mentality? Was it sort of Ed versus the world, or were you against your parents? It's a really interesting view to take at such a young age.
I had several, actually. So 0 to 10, I was like I was never sporty. I was always a little, even though I'm a sporty guy as an adult, I would say 0 to 10, I was Eric Cartman. You ever watch South Park? I was literally, I watched it. 0 to 10, I was like quite chubby. Yeah. And I was Eric Cartman. I was spoiled, chubby. I'd be, no, I want to play computer games. Yeah.
That's a really good impression.
And then almost like a movie, and then took a real darker turn where I sort of went to, for a short while there, I think I was a bit of a disturbed loner, actually, going from place to place. But later on, so I was a disturbed loner for a few years, which is obviously I'm not proud of. But what was interesting later on is, because what happened was, when you're I'll put it this way. When you're a foster kid moving from school to school, you are the lowest of the hierarchy, okay? So if people know you're a foster kid, you've got a target on your back. You're literally the bottom of the hierarchy. And so when you're at that, and so I was often the target. So what happened to me was, by about the age of 16, I was a very good street fighter. Like I could, I had just from pure experience of so much fighting, I was quite an adept street fighter in that age, and hence why I got a broken nose and all that. And so what happened to me was, later on, ironically, I became quite a popular character in my later years of high school because of my years of street experience. I was actually quite funny. I was, I wouldn't say the Joker, but I was definitely the lovable rogue of the class towards the end.
The class rebel, or maybe the crazy guy that you'd always want behind you if there was a fight going on at school.
More like a crazy funny guy. So I wasn't like crazy disturbed. I was like crazy funny. So for example, this kid once stole my friend's pencil case. So I poured orange juice on his head because that's what you do. It was that sort of humor, if that makes sense. So it was a crazy level of humor about it. Everyone thought I was really funny in a crazy, unhinged sort of manner.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, in all this turmoil that was going on, in terms of your parents, what input did they have, if any, during this? Obviously, the family had broken up after 10 to 16, 17. Did you have any contact with them at all?
I did. My family actually came back together, right? And I was, and they were, and just to clarify, my family are great people who made some mistakes. I just want to make that point there, right? Great people who made mistakes, right? And haven't we all? So my parents are great people, made some mistakes, and they actually came back together. The problem was, I was sort of, in a way, I was too long gone. I was already disturbed. And so I had a very acrimonious relationship with my parents until we all really came together in my mid-20s. But my parents, they made their mistakes, and, haven't we all? So don't blame them. But they did their best. I'll give you this answer. Within their resources, they did their best to care for me. Now, an outside observer would say they did a poor job, but in their own minds, they're doing what they can with what they have.
That's a really interesting view, Ed. So how would you describe your mentality? Was it sort of Ed versus the world, or were you against your parents? I mean, it's a really interesting view to take at such a young age.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't so much my parents are the enemies. It's like they just don't care. They really couldn't care less about my welfare. They're just an asset for me to get ahead. So it wasn't that I hated them. It's just that I had no psychological connection to them.
And that's quite an interesting thing to hear, because I think something that I've realized as I've got older, I've got, you know my dad quite well. He's a great person. He's always been supportive. I went through a few, he'll agree with me, a few testing years where I was a bit of an idiot, and I'll be happy to admit that now. At the time, I didn't. I was difficult. But something which it's actually crazy to see is that, you know, I'm really lucky that I've come from such a solid background. I've got great supporting parents, and in essence, they're the reason why I am the person I am today. But what's interesting and really amazing to see is that even though you had that turmoil, to see you here as a really positive, inspirational person, and I guess that's what makes your story so interesting.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to as well. You know, I think what it really comes down to is the sort of decisions that you make, because even though I sort of had that element about me, I had some really good friends, some really great friends, some really caring and supportive people about me. And also, too, as well, the thing that I really admire as well is, you know, the government as well. There are a lot of different things. So what then happened as a result of that was, as my life wasn't working out, I joined the army when I was quite young, right? And so the government was, and that's one thing I really admired about the Australian government. So it's sort of like, even though I came from quite a questionable background and my school grades were terrible and all that, I was still able to get into the Australian Army. So there's things like that. So even though I was, you know, sort of working class, bottom of the heap, there are great programs and stuff to help people build successful lives.
I do want to come back to the veteran part of your experience. What I want to look at is your faith, your Christian faith, and your faith is quite central in your life. And have you always been like this, or when did you pick this up? When did you realize that, you know, religion is something that, I guess, looking at you now, is quite central to your, you know, day to day?
Well, yeah. So I've always been, how can I say, I've always been crazily agnostic. Just didn't care. Just don't care. Even partly today, there's an agnostic level about me. It's sort of like, did not care about religion one bit, right? Just don't care about it. Just trying to survive and make my way in the world. It's in my mid-20s that I started to really believe in God and become a lot more spiritually conscious, right? In my sort of mid-20s. And that was interesting, actually, because that's when I started to really, I suppose, put my faith in a higher power and believe in God. That's when things absolutely changed for me. So when I actually said to myself, you know, your life's just not about you surviving like a rat. You know, there is a higher power. You know, I believe in God and all that. That is what started making me really successful. So it wasn't until I really started to believe in God and ask God for his plan in life, that's where things started to really go my way. And it's, and I got a lot of different interpretations on it. You know, I got very good friends who are, come from Islamic backgrounds, Jewish backgrounds, Buddhist backgrounds, and obviously Christian backgrounds. And I actually had a lot of people really supporting me and giving me great input to help build my spirituality from that viewpoint.
And it's interesting you say that, because I mean, I can sort of resonate with what you're saying. You know, when I was your age, I was also fairly non-religious. I don't think to be very religious, in my opinion, is you know, not what I think you and I are. We put religion into our daily life, but it's interesting. It's a journey that you've taken, isn't it? That you picked up faith.
Well, absolutely. Like, being being a person of faith, and the way I look at things, right? So, yes, I'm a Christian and I believe in Jesus and all that, but I take a very, you would say, almost an interfaith viewpoint. I think all faiths, at the end of the day, you know, we're all worshiping God in our own unique way. And the way I kind of look at that is, when you say, yes, there is a higher power, and in a way you turn yourself over to it, that's when life really starts to work. It's when you try and do your own thing, I think, when you're really pushing, something uphill when you're doing that.
Okay, so thank you for that. So, we want to move on to some of the serious stuff, some of the challenges that you faced. And I'd like you to list the things that you put yourself into, or your life was in after the age of 10. And then what I'd like to try to do is to try to sort of go through each one of them to give it a little bit more explanation behind those that list. So, the challenges of life that you faced, when did it start going wrong, and what were those challenges? I mean, you mentioned that you were a homeless veteran. What else that you faced?
Yeah, so I've probably several challenges, actually. So what happened to me was I was, so with the government, in the army, in certain special task forces doing special stuff with the government, and basically got injured very badly. Had I was on the edge of living for a while, and I had very, very bad PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, complex battlefield, and I was quite sick for a long time. Lost a lot of my memories, and I suppose for me, what happened was that I never actually got treated for my PTSD correctly. So what happened was I sort of left the government and went straight, and actually led quite a successful corporate life for a while. And it was later on that the PTSD caught up with me, and that was in my late 20s. So that's where I lost everything. So, jobs, relationships. I went from being I had a good, successful bounce as a corporate for a while, and then I was sort of found myself living in my car as a homeless veteran. It's sort of like, wow, okay, the PTSD really took hold of me, and I got very sick, and it sort of led to a bunch of bad decisions that put me there.
And when you say you were a veteran, so were you assigned to a particular country where you went and fought or served in that sense?
Yeah, so the type of work that I was in, so I did all domestic Australian-based work, which revolved around anti-terrorism and drug enforcement. So I was more of a defensive agent. It wasn't like I didn't go to the Gulf or anything like that, but it was more working in internal anti-terrorism and drug enforcement. So I was in the army all along, and I was attached to various task forces doing what you would say is, there's no such, in Australia you don't have a DEA. It's basically controlled by the AFP, which is the Australian Federal Police. And so you would say I was a good way of putting it is I was a DEA agent. That's a very good way of putting it.
So you moved from, you were homeless, you were living in your car, you moved from city to city, trying to restart yourself. Would you say that's an accurate sort of a description?
Exactly. One trait about myself, and I actually give credit to my my parents on this one, right? Whatever I do in style. I'm naturally a guy who brings style, so I did homeless well. Right, so I did homeless very well. So I thought, okay, so I'm now a homeless guy living in my car. Let's go live on the beach in Sydney. That was my logic, right? So it's sort of like, I'm not going to be some homeless bum in a park. I want to be like a cool homeless guy on the beach. So whatever I do, it has to be cool, right? It's just an Edwards ear thing. And so what it was that, I ended up I was in Hobart at the time. Yeah, so I was there at the time, and what I did was, so I was still lucky I had my car. So I tell you what, being homeless of a car and being homeless without a car are two different realities, right? So just want to acknowledge that. Being homeless this might actually sound weird. Being homeless of a car is actually not that bad. It's homeless without a car, which is really bad. Because your car becomes your home. You sleep in it. It protects you from the elements and that sort of thing.
Something that I want to quickly touch on, Edward, was you discussed PTSD. I know someone that I work with currently. He's a veteran, and he still to this day struggles with PTSD. I mean, he saw his best mate burn up in front of him. So sometimes he comes into work, or sometimes he can't come into work, because it's just such a traumatic thing that still sits with him today. So could you explain a bit more what these PTSD sort of effects were and how it affected you? Because you said that you led a corporate life, so it's quite interesting that you actually went into work and then you felt the effects, or they became more prominent a little bit later on.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I've always had a very good poker face, so I'm very, very good at hiding the way I feel. Very good at that. Always had a very good. It's a trait that I learnt in my teens. Very good poker face, and So I was able to sort of cage a beast for a while, but what would happen is the best way I can explain it is, the Iron Man films with Robert Downey Jr., right? The Iron Man films, right? Remember how he would have, a few times he would have panic attacks and he'd sort of fall up against his car, like the Tony Stark character? I was quite like that. So I would have that happen 3 or 4 times a day, where I would have a panic attack and blank out, but I was very good at hiding it. Very, very good at hiding it. A lot of my coping, so I learned quite a few deep breathing exercises, and I was very good at hiding it and maintaining my composure. So that was probably a government trait. So because, when you work for the government, right, you have to develop a very good poker face, and you got to learn. You got to get very astute at hiding the way that you feel. So that trait always let me get through. So I could be sitting at my desk, and I could have a panic attack, and I might blank out a bit, but I would just go for a walk or do something cool like that just to cover up the way I was feeling, so no one would tweak to what I was doing. So my coping mechanism was food, and my weight ballooned. I would go from being buff to being really fat within a few months. So I had not anymore, I'm pretty good these days, but I had a lot of problems with fluctuating weight. So it's never been drugs or gambling or women or anything. It's always been, food has always been my vice. That's always been my even it's always been my coping mechanism. So I would have times in my 20s where I was like really fit and handsome, and then 6 months later I look like Elvis towards the end. I'd be all like chubby and it happened quite a bit. So food was always that coping mechanism, which I tragically used.
Right, and so in the past conversations, you mentioned that you nearly died. What did you mean when you said you nearly died? Could you explain that and elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So what happened to me in a bad drug sting? I got hit over the head with what I think was a baseball bat, and that was pretty much the end of my military policing career. I was extremely unconscious. I was in a coma for a few weeks, and I was on the edge of living. I had full-on out-of-body experiences and everything. And when I came to, my memories, even today, my memories of, if you asked me what I was doing when I was 16, I could tell you everything. If you ask me about my memories in my early 20s, they're super patchy, very, very patchy. So yeah, it's in a coma, almost died. As I got out, I was never treated. I was medically treated, but I was never psychologically treated for my PTSD. And so things I've struggled with is like PTSD, anxiety, and also amnesia from that period. So I don't have like amnesia like a Hollywood film, but from there, a few years of my life, you can show me a photo of me and I'll say I wasn't there. That's how bad patchy my memories are from that part of my life.
And how old were you at that point?
I was about around 21. Around 21 was when that all happened. Around 21.
It's interesting because obviously I have a 21-year-old, and I'm thinking of him at the moment, Hassan, and obviously we shelter our children so much. And I'm listening to you, and you were exposed to the world completely. And how does that make you feel? I mean, even today, do you have any ill feeling, any grudges towards individuals, people, parents? I mean, you mentioned parents, you don't, but
yeah. Well, it's funny actually. The answer is not really. I don't have many grudges. There's only one grudge I have actually, and I was saying this to you before. There's only one grudge I have, and I don't like lefties. And I'll explain to you what I mean. There's only one grudge I have, and that's against lefties, because I'll use this as an example. As I was growing up, the racism I dealt with would always come from people on the political left. Always come from people on political left. And it would be this form of racism. And this is a grudge I hold to this day, right? Which is, oh, well, Ed, you come from an Iranian background. You're this, that, you're disadvantaged. Because you're disadvantaged, you can't do things like us people can. So I was always given that patronizing level of racism that always came from the political left. And that's something that's always stuck with me. Something I've never liked. So, you know that whole thing where it's sort of like, oh, well, I even get this today. Oh, well, Ed, you're a man of colour. So therefore, because you're a man of colour, you need extra handouts from the government. It's that level of, that patronising racism that the lefters right into. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you were saying off air to me actually before about the Australian government. I think it'd be quite interesting actually to share that with some of our viewers, because I think a lot of the viewers will be from the UK, and I know myself. I've been to Australia twice, and I really enjoyed it there. I thought it was a very multicultural, very inclusive society. I felt that the people that were, obviously it's built on immigrants, really. Everyone was integrated, and it was interesting what you were saying to me, that the government is similar to the Dubai government, or sort of an Arab government. So would you be able to elaborate on that a bit more for the listeners?
Yeah, so what I always say to people is the Australian government is an amazing government and they're full of great people. And one thing I love about Australia is, and a lot of people know this and don't know this, the Australian government is actually a very, very powerful government that's very involved in your life. So in some ways, Australia has a lot of elements of socialism in terms of the way the government behaves. And I'll give you an example. And I see this all very positively, right? So for example, I often compare the Australian government to governments like Dubai and Singapore, for example, right? Singapore like that. So whereas the government here, and this is what I love about Australia. I love Australia. So in Australia, what I love about Australia, no one is racist or sexist in Australia. At the end of the day, really, compared to the world, right? At the end of the day, Australia is very much who you are as a person. If you've got a good heart and you do a good job, doesn't matter whether you're gay, straight, black, white, whatever, you're going to go a long way. Okay? You're going to go a long way. And the whole classification of like, you're white, you're black, we're not really into that in Australia. And that's why I think Australia works as a country. Because the moment you okay, you know how you and I are all individuals, right? We're all our own people, right? The moment you categorize someone as, well, you're an Asian Pakistani, or Edward, you're a man of color Iranian. The moment you start doing that to people, that is when you strip people of their personal identities and put them into groups like that. That's what I think leads to a lot of the problems that we have today. And Australia's not like that. Australia's sort of like, we don't care who you are. If you're just a nice person, welcome. And that's what I really love about things. And what I love about the government here is that the Australian government is very, very good on maintaining that. So if you do the wrong thing, if you do the right things by the government, you'll go a long way. If you do the wrong things, you'll get in trouble here. And I think, that level of government involvement, I think that's one of the reasons why Australia works so well as a country. You do the right thing, you have a good time. If you do the wrong thing, you're going to get locked up. Things aren't going to go well for you. And I think it's a great thing.
I grew up in the Middle East, so coming back to a boarding school in Oxford, where there was no colored people, there's all white. We've always said to our children, you'll have to work twice as hard as everybody else. Listening to you and then hearing what you're saying, it made me realize actually, perhaps I'm not going to say we were wrong, but it's you're stigmatized into that corner. And we do it to ourselves partly.
Yeah, and I blame the left. And you're actually making my point. I blame the left for that because, again, I'll give you an example. So I love Australia. I come from a very Australian viewpoint, right? And Australian culture is very libertarian. And this is what I say to people. Australia has, from this viewpoint, a very libertarian culture. And this is basically the way it goes. In Australia, no one cares about where you're from or your background. What they care about is whether you're impacting on their rights or not. So, for example, in Australian culture is very much this. Hey, welcome. I don't care where you're from. We're going to call you friend. But you leave me alone. If you try and tell me what to do, you're going to have a problem. That's very Australian culture. You leave me alone. Let's respect each other and leave each other alone. And then that way we can become friends. It's very Australian culture. Where the left comes in, this is the problem that I have with the left, right? And unfortunately, the left never really took hold in this regard in Australia, which is good. But where the left come in is sort of like, well, we're going to put you into this racial category. You're in that racial category. And I'll give you an example. And I know I'm not proud of telling you this, but I'll be honest with you. So I'm quite involved in Australian politics in our Liberal Party, which is sort of like our centre-right government, right? It's a government that's in charge. And I live in a place called Parramatta, which is Western Sydney. And everyone from there's not a lot of white people. Everyone in Western Sydney is from somewhere, right? So if you catch a train, it's like, spot the white guy. It's like that, right? So I come from a Middle Eastern background, but I'm sort of whitish. Iranians are pretty white, right? Iranians are quite white. But I'm the whitest you'll get around here. I'm like, even though I'm not a white guy, I'm like the pseudo white guy, if that makes sense.
We've covered quite a lot. So we've covered the fact that your childhood, and we've covered what happened in your teens, and then the challenges that you faced. And I was actually, when I asked you the question about your challenges, I was really keen for the listeners to understand how easy is it to slip into the position that you are in.
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah, totally. A few bad decisions. Oh, yeah, you can slide very quickly with a few dumb decisions in life, believe me. Well, dumb decisions I had was... so I'll tell you some of the dumb things that I did. I'll give you some juiciness for our attractive listeners. So I'll tell you some of the dumb things that I did. Just wasting money when I had it, not getting my PTSD looked after, entering, sort of relationships with, women I should not enter relationships with. All these little, and also as well, not thinking ahead, not thinking, well, what do I actually want to do with my life? You know what I mean? So a lot of dumb decisions like that, which led to sort of my destruction. Right, but then to the counterpoint to that, my correct decisions were okay when I was homeless in my car. Is okay, what I'm going to do with my life? How am I going to do things? What is my purpose on this planet? Those sort of things. So I think interestingly, it can be a few dumb decisions that can throw your life out of sync. But speaking to the positive, a few smart decisions can put your life completely back on track.
Yeah, agreed. And these dumb decisions that you say, were they made in the teenage years, or were they made in the 20s? Because that also has an impact.
I would say the way I look at my own life is in my teen years. I kind of give myself a pass because I was dealing with external forces. It was more me. I describe myself as a rat. I was more just a rat trying to survive. Right? That was sort of a better way of surmising my teen years. My 20s, though, I made a series of good decisions and bad decisions, and my dumb decisions in my 20s were all based around what I was feeling in the moment and not pushing back. So I used to say yes to too many things. I always used to say yes to situations that would always get me into trouble. Whereas, ironically, one of the things that have really helped me out a lot later in life was learning how to say no. And I think learning how to say no and walking away from situations is a very important thing. And interestingly, learning how to say no and knowing when to walk away from situations has helped me really build my own life and build the lives of a lot of the people in my family.
Ed, something that I'm perhaps struggling with is you're obviously living on the street, you're going through a tough time. I'm just trying to put myself in that position and to think, I would have my family probably there. I probably wouldn't have been in that situation. We have a very big, tight-knit family. I think what I'm struggling with is, did you not have that support? Were there not people saying, come stay? Or were you kind of just left to your own devices?
Well, I was kind of left to my own devices, but I've had, and I got to credit my dad on this one. One trait I've always had that has always got me out of trouble is my dad, to this day, great guy, is a very tall, handsome and charismatic Persian guy. So I don't know if you know a lot of Persian guys, but Persian men can be very charming and very charismatic. And I kind of picked up that trait from my dad. So I've always been a sweet talker. So I've always, even though I'm very good in a fight, albeit I'd be rusty these days, right? I haven't been in a fight in a long time, so I'll probably get the crap beaten out of me tomorrow. But in my heyday, I was very good with fighting. But I always had my dad's charismatic trait, so I'd always be able to talk my way into and out of anything.
So what's the best situation that you managed to talk your way out of, or who have you sweet talked out of difficult situations?
I've sweet talked a lot of people. Like at one point, I had a gang that was actually going to beat me up, right? And I totally manipulated them and sweet talked them out of it. And actually, so basically, I remember this one. This gang, this person said I dissed this gang, right? And this gang was going to beat me up because I disrespected them. And I said, hey, look, you guys are actually awesome. I'm actually a big fan of you guys. That person's actually a liar, and they said all the shit about you. And then they went and bashed up that other person. It was hilarious. So it was like return to sender. Oh, he said this, he said that. And there was an Asian gang. I said, oh, by the way, he hates Asians. You know he's a racist, right? And I just went on and on like that, and it worked.
So with all this going on, when did you realize that I need help. I mean, how did you get yourself out of this hellhole? And did anybody come and talk to you? Did they shake you? Did they slap you around and say, "Come on, wake up"?
Well, I kind of did that myself. So when I was in Hobart, even though my life fell apart and I moved on from there, I had some wonderful friends in Hobart that really showed me a love of support and kindness, right? And just want to say a good thing, like Hobart, little Tasmania. The people there were incredible. So even though one could say I left Hobart not very successful, homeless, I had so many great people there who I'm actually still friends with today, right? I'm actually still connected to them today over Facebook and LinkedIn. There were so many great people in Hobart, and a lot of people who understood my inner turmoil. They were really nice. So so even though I left Hobart unsuccessful from a Western society viewpoint, the people there were outstanding. So the people in my life in Hobart, they were just caring, supportive, in their own unique ways. They really tried to help me. And so a lot of even though I moved on as a homeless guy, I had a lot of their help. A lot of their help is sort of really helped me get my life back on track the way I wanted in my 30s. Awesome.
And that's a really good point to take forward, because fast forward today, you're running a successful coaching and mentoring business in beautiful Sydney. You have a wonderful family, wife, kids, and some of your clients, most of your clients, in fact, describe you as a real, genuine person, an ethical man, always willing to help. That's a real result, wouldn't you say so?
Oh, it's great, and I'm very blessed by that. Like I got, and thank you for yourselves and everyone being supportive. I got clients all across the world right now. And to me, what's been and this is where I actually one of the key traits that I think is very important is, and this is the way I look at it. And this is the way I approach the world. If you approach the world in very much, I want to help people mindset, right? If your mind, which is very my mindset. So I wake up every day thinking about how I'm going to help people. That's what goes through my mind most of the time. When you approach your reality with that mindset, you make a lot of friends and you become very well liked and popular. Equally, in the opposite, not equally, but conversely, when the opposite is true, if you wake up, and I tragically know people like this, if you wake up saying, okay, how am I going to screw someone today, and how am I going to do this and how am I going to do that, you're going to make enemies that day. Right? And what happens is that I know people on both ends of the spectrum. I know people like us, and we're obviously all very similar, get along. We're all wonderful people. We love helping people. It's pretty obvious, right? Our, I suppose, opposing characters on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of them lead very unsuccessful lives because they breed contempt. People don't like them. And so maybe you get out what you get. The world gives you what you put out. If you put out love and kindness, you get that back. If you put out, hatred and greed, you get a lot more of that back. And I think it's very important what you put out every day.
And it's interesting. So from this point, I just want to sort of roll back to the beginning of when you started Excellence Above, which is your business. When was that light bulb moment? This is what you wanted to do. What influenced you? How did you get into it?
When I was living in my car, right? And I was living in my car on DY Beach, by the way. So I was living in my car on the beach. And when I was living in my car, I'm like, man, you're a bit of a loser, Ed. You're kind of like... And what resonated with me is when I was living in my car, and this is what I actually said at the time, and I say this again, I say this to this day, is let's say, I don't know, Tinkerbell or a fairy came along and said, oh, Edward, right now I could wave my wand and give you back your old life. Well, this is while I was living in my car. I would have told Tinkerbell to go beat it, right? Because I didn't want that. Even though I was in my car, I was sort of like, you know what? To be honest with you, my life kind of sucked anyway. I want to take my life in a different direction. I want to do something new. And it was in that sort of time where I was able to think clearly. And I thought, it's actually funny because I'm 41 now, and I thought about this when I was like about 31. I said, you know what? In about a decade, I want to be some kind of like big speaker and global influencer and stuff. And I want to be like some kind of inspirational, motivational guy. And it actually happened. And that was my original thinking. I thought, I don't want to come back as some boring corporate. I want to become some kind of inspirational global coach of some form. And
what was it like in the beginning? It must have been, did you you must have hit brick walls and you must have felt like giving up, because it's yeah, I've been involved in startups. It's tough.
Well, it totally sucked, because the reason why it sucked is because, and I knew this at the time, I started from a very low base. And even to this day, I had a lot of personal development to do. So it wasn't like I was a successful business leader that, had millions of dollars and it's like, oh, I'm going to become a coach now. I was like I was a loser. I was like this homeless, I was like some weirdo homeless guy living in his car thinking he's going to become this high-end coach helping people. And it's sort of like, yeah, but you're a loser, Ed. That's a small problem, right? So it was growing my business. And this is, I was actually saying this to a client friend yesterday. Getting out of poverty was actually my first step, right? Because technically I was in poverty. I'm a homeless guy, right? So step number one is getting out of poverty for myself, and I suppose that was it, because as I got myself out of poverty and built my own life, that then created new possibilities. It's sort of like, wow, if I can get myself out of poverty, I can help anyone get out of poverty. And, there you go. And it's funny, it's like the way I look at things is every day I just improve a little bit and things take off. Like I started to really take off about a year ago, especially like from globally, I started to take off really about a year ago.
That's very interesting you say, because obviously you are the brand, aren't you? You're the product. It's not like you set up a company and you're selling a product. And if anything, that's probably easier, because you yourself are going to have down days. You're going to have, like my dad said earlier, challenges that came across you, especially at the beginning, like getting out of homelessness. And it seems that your story is actually the thing that is the inspiration. I find you much more inspiring, the fact that you've gone through being homeless, PTSD, to where you are today, than someone, as you said, who's got millions of dollars and he's decided he wants to do coaching after, I don't know, being a corporate lawyer or something like that. So yeah, I think that must be quite difficult, because sometimes, when you were starting off at the beginning, you yourself weren't exactly where you wanted to be, maybe mentally, but you still had to push that positive message across.
Yeah, it's like, I want to be a positive guy. I want to help people. I want to do this. I thought I'd love to be some kind of coach. And that was just the direction I took my life, and it's all just baby steps for me. I started from a very weak base, and for me, every day was just baby steps. But what's interesting though, and this is what I especially want to say to our wonderful listeners as well, is the way I look at things, and I hold this is the viewpoint I held a decade ago. That was a very healthy viewpoint, which I hold right now, is that even if you take the smallest, it doesn't matter where you are in life, as long as you take one baby step a day, that's all that matters, because a baby step a day, that's 365 steps a year, right? 3 years, what? That's over 1,000 steps. 1,000 baby steps is actually quite a fair distance. So the way I look at life even now, as long as I'm taking a little step every day forward, you're going to win. And that's true, right? That's absolutely true. Just take a baby step every day. Oh, nothing might happen for a year or two, but no, you keep doing that, you're going to win over the 5 to 10 year time frame. You're going to win big playing that sort of game.
So let me ask you a question here, because it's really interesting. At any time, were you not fearful of what people thought? When you were starting this business, and because I see you're very positive. When I've talked to you privately also, and did you not have that? Because fear breeds inaction. It's fascinating. I mean, did you not think that, oh, I don't like this person, I don't like that, I'm not going to, because they perhaps said, look, this is not going to work for you?
Oh no, I've had that crap all the time, right? I've had that, and again, I'm going to bring good old, my favorite lefty friends back into the picture as well. Is the lefties have always been the bane of my existence, right? And lefty people would always say to me, "Oh, this is from lefties. Oh, Ed, don't worry. Well, you've had so many disadvantages in life. And that would just enrage me, right? They'd always, because I'm not like in their minds a white person, they'd always be putting me down or patronizing me somehow, right? And that would always enrage me, and that would make me more motivated, right? But no, it's I suppose what it is that, of course, I've had many doubts and I've had many people put me down, but it comes down to your belief in your own life journey. And because I really believe in my own life journey, it's sort of like, no one's going to stop me, especially a bunch of lefties, so I will just keep going for it.
What would you say are your top 3 achievements? And do you think there's a difference between success and achievement? Because I feel that success seems quite external. When you're successful, it's to show the world, but an achievement seems to be something much more intrinsic. I mean, that's the way I sort of view success and achievement. I'm not sure if you agree with that.
But no, I think it's a great view. I think stepping back for a moment, right? Success and achievement is very subjective, very, very subjective. And in fact, it's extremely subjective. It's like the common view of, it's like why people in Hollywood go insane. They've got millions of dollars and they're supposedly really successful, then they go completely insane, right? That's the representation of society's telling them that they're successful, but they don't feel successful, so therefore they go insane and they do weird stuff, right? The take that I have, and not I hold, but I share with a lot of people, is success and achievement is subjective. And it's up to one. You got to be very careful of society saying to you what success is, because success is having a big house and a white picket fence and a mortgage and a nice car that you're paying $1,000 a month for. If that's success, I'm not interested, right? You can take that success and, the lefties can take that success back, right? Success is a very subjective thing. So whatever success or achievement is to you, it's good to be very clear on that. So, for example, my successes is my wonderful family, helping other people and building a great life for myself. I don't deep down say, well, until I make $10 million, I'm successful. I don't hold that viewpoint. Some people do, and that's fine.
So in terms of the challenging times that you went through, for the listeners, what was the one thing you learned?
Yeah, the word's persistence. I would say the simple word is persistence. That was very well unpacked in the film The Founder, starring Michael Keaton. I don't know, just for the sake of listeners, if you haven't, go see the film The Founder, starring Michael Keaton. It's about Ray Kroc's story. Yeah, that film hit me right. My actual wife said, Ed, you got to watch. She watched it first. Ed, you so got to watch this film. This film's so you. And a lot of people have said that. It's, I would say persistence, because even though I was a homeless loser, I would wake up every day and I'd persist. I'd be, I'm going to do something about it today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. My step might be seemingly insignificant to the external observer, but I know, again, I've always had this viewpoint, and this viewpoint was very correct thinking 10 years ago until this day. Again, a baby step a day is 365 baby steps a year. That's quite a fair distance.
Yeah, that is. And so what do you think in your mind are the 2 defining attributes that you picked up at the time when times were tough, or at the time when you were turning the corner, and that you still practice those 2 attributes today?
Yeah, so I would say persistence and independent critical thinking. So in other words, 100 people could rock up now and tell me something. Whether I have 100 people telling me the same thing or 1,000 people, the amount of people saying the same thing doesn't impact my viewpoint. So, and I think it's very important you got to be a critical independent thinker. So just because a bunch of people are running around saying something doesn't mean it's true, right? 1 million people can be wrong and 1 person can be correct.
I think that's an issue with society today, though. You look at sort of the explosion of social media and you see that perfect, I have inverted commas, Instagram lifestyle, and everyone's trying to strive for that. But in reality, it doesn't exist. So it's interesting to have that point of view, that independent critical thinking. So yeah, that's just something that really resonates with me. This is the first time I've ever spoken to you, as you know. We connected earlier before quickly. So my dad speaks about you a lot, and yeah, that really does shine through, that you're someone that does what you want to do, and you've done that from a very early age, and you don't let people influence what you want to do and where you want to be. And that's a really strong trait, because a lot of people are following the crowd and doing things because they're either scared to do it because people judge them, or they're not doing it because it's not considered popular, or sort of, I guess, the mainstream that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, today. Just going back to that point you made about the Instagram influencer, right? That reality is cracking, because a lot of those big top they've had, you get a lot of those big again, I'm not saying anyone particular, I'm just talking generally, but you get those ones that, have the Ferrari, or they have like all the suitcase of money and that sort of thing, right? You have a lot of people who are cracking their realities. So you'll have like the Instagram influencer all sort of done up looking great. and then you'll have someone who was just standing nearby that took a real photo and posted it before the person like airbrushed it or digitally modified it.
That's the big thing now, isn't it? The airbrushing. That's exposed a lot of people.
Yeah, well, so that fake reality, and I do say it is a fake reality that they're trying to broadcast. It's like that. Truth comes out in the end, all throughout human civilization. You can lie, people can lie, organizations can lie, and governments can lie, but the truth always comes out in the end. It's like, and this brings me to a key point, is in my own journey, and I've been very attuned to this from day one. I've always been as 100% real, honest, and authentic from day one. So the reality that I'm presenting is actually my reality. If anyone's going to try and crack my reality, they're not going to get very far because I'm telling the actual truth, right? So to me, when those Instagram influencers pitch that fake reality, in a way, you're sowing the seeds for your own destruction because, yeah, you can't create that BS reality and keep it forever. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and your story is yours. It's you. Those are your seeds, your plants, your growth, your tree. It's all belongs to you, and nobody can take that away.
Yeah, I mean, people might come along and say, "Oh, hi Ed, you suck," or "Ed, you're not funny," or "Ed, you're not as tall and good looking as me." They can say that, right? But they can't say it's fake. It's definitely not fake. It's 100% real.
Something that I wanted to touch on as well quickly, Ed, was balance is so important in life. You clearly do something you're really passionate about, and I think that's something which a lot of people don't get the chance to do. They get up in the morning, they take their long, busy commute into London. They're like sardines on the underground. They might be earning, a packet, and that's probably going to be my future in the next year or so. Anyway, I'm going to be probably living that life, but it's really important to find that passion. And I feel that it's taken me to. This is only the second episode of our podcast, but I'm really finding that this is something I'm passionate about, and you seem to be doing something you're clearly passionate about as a living. So how do you view doing something important?
Well, I think it's very important, but in your case, you also got to be a tactician as well. You got to be tactically intelligent, right? So, for example, let's say you're living in London, and you're taking the underground to work every day, and you're literally doing the whole sardine thing, right? Me saying it that way sucks. You might turn around and say to yourself, yeah, I don't mind doing this for a few years because that's how I'm going to make all my money and get my experience. And that's going to give me time to really unpack and explore what I want to do with my life. You got to be tactical about things. It's sort of like, so for example, case in point, like, yeah, I was a homeless bum living in my car, and it's like, well, I want to be some kind of coach. And then I found this coaching course I wanted to do. I think it costs, I can't remember, it was like $6,000 or something like that, $6,000. Yeah, I didn't have any money. And it's sort of like, so I did a lot of things I didn't want to do. So I worked in shopping malls selling health products, right? I did all these odd jobs everywhere just to get money to get food and to pay for my education. So every cent I was getting was going into my education, which in hindsight was a great investment. And, so at the end of the day, it's all right for me to say, oh, you got to follow your dreams and follow your passions. But you also have to be a smart tactical thinker. How are you going to fund that dream? How are you going to fund those passions? You might have to do some short-term things you don't want to do to win the objective.
It's a fantastic point, which really takes me on to your passion, because one of the things I think that draw me to you, right, was I love your signature greeting. So say it once for the listeners. Your signature greeting when you're recording.
Hello, you awesome friends. This is your pal Edward Azher speaking.
It's brilliant, and I think that I usually pick that up. Usually, it's the first or second thing I see in the morning when I pick up my phone. So that's wonderful. And then you have also a signature phrase. You rock. Now, I think that these...
Yeah, I've got a few. Love your work and bless your heart. So I got a few signature phrases there.
Yeah. And talk about that a little bit more, because you're a marketing guy. You clearly you understand the psyche of human beings in terms of how to brand themselves. Do you think that these phrases help define you in terms of in this very crowded arena that we operate in?
Absolutely. And it's very common. So a lot of entertainers, right, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't realize this, the moment you start whacking out videos on LinkedIn or whatever, or YouTube, whatever you're into, you're actually an entertainer. A lot of people don't realize that, but you're actually an entertainer, because when I do videos, my goal is to entertain and educate. It's not like, oh, well, it's Edward Azher and you got to be entertaining, you got to be compelling. And so part of that is creating your act, right? So, for example, there's this guy on YouTube who I find his name's Jeremy. He runs a YouTube channel called Geeks and Gamers. And when he does it, he goes, "Hello, this is Jeremy here doing another video." And he always says that every time, right? It's a signature. So, "Hey, it's Jeremy coming to you with another video." It's like that. You got to have that default opening that people get to know you for and get to do it. So I've spent some time saying, "Hello, you awesome friends. This is your pal, Edward Zia speaking." And people love it. It's funny and it's engaging and it's compelling.
Well, I regularly sort of play your posts out loud, so I let my wife listen to it, my daughter listen to it, and we all have a little giggle about that because you are so happy and bouncy and optimistic. And it's wonderful. I think it makes my day anyway. I don't know. I'm sure it'll make some listeners' day also. But it's incredible. It's so integral to your work, isn't it?
Well, on a funny note, and this actually happened about 2 weeks ago. So I live in, just to give some context for our business crossworld. So I live in a place called Parramatta, which is in Western Sydney. It's about, I think it's like 30 kilometers outside of Sydney. So it takes like 35 minutes to take the train in, like an express train, right? So I think it's like 30 kilometers away from the city, something like that, 20, 30. I should know that, but I can't remember. I was on a train and there was someone who was listening to one of my videos on a train. It was hilarious, about 2 weeks ago. So I was just sitting there on a train and I said, "Hello, you awesome friends." I'm like, what the hell? Anyway, and then and it was some, I don't know them, it was someone on LinkedIn watching one of my videos, and he looked, and I sort of walked up to him and he goes, "Oh my God, you're Edward Zia." Yeah. And I said, "Hey, thanks for watching my video." He goes, "Oh, I watch them every day on the train. It's hilarious." And we connected anyway. It's funny as, absolutely funny. But it's funny when you're on a train and someone's listening to your video that you don't know. It's a very surreal outer body of experience. It was funny as, absolutely hilarious. And the guy was like, "Oh, no way, you're Edward Zia. I watch your stuff all the time." It was really funny. So it's good.
That's really good. So with regards to what you do now in terms of coaching and mentoring, if there's one piece of advice that you would give to somebody, especially after what we've heard and the experience you've been through, what would that be?
I'm going to go back. I'm going to default to the founder, persistence. If I look at all my lessons over the years, is that daily persistence, and it's little baby steps. So let's say you have a day and your day's not that good. Even if you've taken one baby step, you can chalk that day as a win. So persistence, and just take those little baby steps every day. So my success has not come from me doing anything really cool. My success is an accumulation of daily baby steps over the years.
Thank you for listening to our first business podcast. Unfortunately for our listeners, the volume significantly reduces towards the end. We hope you understand and continue to support the Chattercast family.
Right. So persistence and daily baby steps. Listeners, you've heard it from Edward Zia.
Something to add to that quickly is that actually is very relevant to what we're doing. We just started a podcast, and even just putting yourself out there is such a big step. And it's not going to be perfect. You're going to learn your trade. As you go on, you'll get better and you'll change things. But I would say something that just go out there and keep on putting videos out there, like we're putting out audio podcasts, and just do what you enjoy and do it for yourself rather than always worrying what someone else will think.
Exactly. No one likes and you're spot on. I love where you're going. No one likes a crowd pleaser, right? Like if you go back to who was that guy? Was it Dean James? What's the I'm going back. I'm not being politically correct here, but what was that? Was it Dean James? Was he like the guy in the 50s on the motorbike? He'd wear like the leather cap and he always have the cigarette? Or like early Marlon Brando? It's like no one likes a conformist, right? Like if you go back throughout human civilization, the rebels have always been the cool people. What makes someone cool? They're not following the system. There's something different about them. So if you want to be, no one likes a conformist, right? Conformists are just boring as. So to me, just conforming like, oh, I just want to make everyone happy and do what they say. Yeah, that's a great way of living a miserable.
By the way, listeners, let me just say, I've only known Ed, 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Ed? 5 weeks.
Something like that, yeah.
5 weeks, something like that. Yeah. And this is the power of social media. This is the power of LinkedIn specifically, because I think it is an incredible place if used correctly. That you spark up relationships and friendships like I have, and now my son has with Edward, and we're thousands of miles apart, and yet we communicate every day, don't we, Edward?
Exactly, and that's the power of and bravo to Microsoft and LinkedIn. LinkedIn and Microsoft, well, was the same thing, but LinkedIn has totally changed the way the world communicates. LinkedIn, as for the sake of our awesome viewers, LinkedIn has totally transformed over the past 2 years. It went from basically being some job seeker platform to being a global network that brings us all together, and it's disrupting. It's actually disrupting. It's totally disrupting the world. I mean, it turned me from a Sydney to a guy known around Sydney to a guy who has clients all across the world now, and only under a year as well. So yeah, I mean, bravo to LinkedIn and Microsoft, genius platform.
And I wanted to acknowledge you specifically, Edward, because coming from the dark depths of where you were, and to becoming and growing, I hope and pray that you continue growing, to becoming a rocking social media phenomenon. I really salute you, my friend. You're awesome, absolutely awesome.
Thank you. And you guys are top interviewers. I mean, I don't believe this is your third podcast. I think you guys are hustling me because you've done such a great job.
If you wish to speak to Edward, we will post Edward's details on our social media feed. So his website, his LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Please, please, please do contact him, because he's making a difference, and he's made a difference in his own life, and he's made a difference certainly in my life. Really big credit to Ed. Big credit.
It's been an honor talking to you, incredible people. And I just want to give a big shout out to our listeners. To our wonderful listeners, make sure you follow the Rubbanis. They're one happening family that are in the zone.
I want to thank Ed for joining us on our very first business podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have him sharing his brilliant story with us. And we look forward to having you on soon, Ed. So thank you very much for your time today. And we'll be releasing this hopefully later on this week. And just for our excellent listeners, we will be doing a review of last week's football fixtures, and we will also be doing a preview of this weekend's fixtures. So that will also be released later on in the week. Thank you very much for listening. See you soon. Bye.